Africa. We got to do Africa in 2 parts. We're going to do the kingdoms and the history. Then we will do decolonization later this week. Africa is kind of that big unknown. For whatever reason, not a lot of people spend time on it in world history curriculums. So we're going to line everything up today that we can. So Africa is not a country, it is a continent. And it makes up 1/5, 20% of the entire Earth's landmass. Wildly diverse, many terrains, many languages, many religions. West Africa over here, East Africa down here, and then South and Central Africa, with the north being a gigantic desert. 2 things travel across that desert in terms of trade goods. One is gold, the other is salt. Also coming along that route would be religion. All right, we have 2 big migrations. The first one is often mislabeled. People call it the Bantu Migration. That is incorrect. It is the Bantu migrations that start for a 1,000-year period from 1500 to 500 BC. So way back, like before ancient, Mycenaean Crete, all the way to the Roman Empire, starting here and going over and then down to the bottom. And Bantu is a root language dialect, like Latin is in the Western world. The other root language is Swahili, which goes from like Tanzania up to Eritrea over here on the East Coast. They are root languages where people migrated across time. Ready? Okay, good. All right, here you can see the Great Bantu Migration. And as the Bantus moved southward, they, number one, displaced a lot of people. They kicked people out of their native homelands, looking for pasture lands for their herds. They also spread metal technology, ironworking. The yellow you can see is Swahili. First kingdom we're going to talk about is the kingdom of Aksum. And like we always say, if you don't know, you can always Aksum. Right? Aksum is over here on East Africa, just below Egypt. They will become a big center between 100 and 900 AD. Daily occurrence, guys. That's what you guys sound like at the buses. All right. So if you're a bus rider, that's what I hear every day. So anyway, how that exists, I have no idea.
It doesn't sound that loud when you're outside.
It doesn't, but up here we're like, don't know what's going on out there, but I'm not going out there. So anyway, 100 to 900. So Aksum, you want to think the heart of Rome. When Rome was that large extractive economy, and Rome was trading all over, well, Aksum was a trading partner with North Africa and the Mediterranean, like Rome and the Byzantine Empire. They will go all the way to like 900, so right in the heart of the dark ages of Western Europe, during the Byzantine Empire of Eastern Europe, and during the spread of Islam. They are going to be a key area as they trade not only with the Middle East, with Mecca, right across almost, but also the Indian Ocean. And it is Aksum that is going to connect Africa, Asia, and Europe. It's going to connect 3 continents. People from Aksum are going to export gold, salt, precious, gems, weird animal skins. It is also in the middle of this time where the Islamic slave trade starts, with people from East Africa being sold over into the Middle East. Mostly young ladies going to work in harems, or live in harems for Middle Eastern sultans. All right. Everybody good? All right, we're sure. Okay, great. All right. One of the most important kings is a guy named King Azana. King Azana in the 300s. This is still where the Roman Empire still has a pulse. King Azana is a Christian, and he conquered the ancient kingdom of Nubia. Now, Nubia is an Old Testament empire. If you read the Old Testament, they are a trading partner of Old Egypt, like Pharaonic Egypt. But King Azana will conquer Nubia, and he will convert to Christianity. He will convert to Christianity as the official religion before the Roman Empire falls. So he will build churches, like here the Church of St. George, where he will carve out a quarry and build this church out of the actual stone. Even though it was next to the heartland of Islam 300 years later, Aksum was never really tampered with for a couple reasons. Number one, they lived kind of in a mountainous valley terrain, number one. And number two, they were peoples of the book. And number three, always helped facilitate trading. All right? When you're trading, you're peaceful, you are making money. Just like the Mayas, just like the Incas, one of the things the Aksumites did was they made terraced farming. They built an intricate series of irrigation canals that they could raise and lower like locks, constantly moving the water so it didn't get stagnant. And they built these large steels, these kind of obelisks, these Egyptian obelisk type things, where their information was recorded. And I love the saying on the coins of Aksum, like we have in God we trust, they have, may the country be satisfied. May every citizen of our country be like content and happy and satisfied. Ready? I want to take a bite of donut. All right, great. All right, Aksum is going to fall. We don't know why. Very similar to Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro. They move inland. Don't know why. Maybe there was a plague or crop failure or invaders. We're not sure, but they move inland. And while they're never officially conquered, right around the 630s, right as Muhammad is in Mecca and Medina, they just fade away. They just kind of crumble. Oh, like this donut. All right. Good to go? All right. Big thing. We're going to go from Aksum over here, and we're going to cross the vast Sahara Desert. Sahara Desert is a main trade route. It will connect the Silk Road, the overland route. It will also connect the Indian Ocean trade route with the Atlantic Ocean. So we now have literally global trade routes across Africa, across the Indian Ocean, and across Asia. Everything you can imagine will be traded. Animal skins, perfume, beads, jewelry, Islam, Christianity, slaves, but the two biggies are gold and salt. So if you have to talk about a trade route in Africa, gold and salt. The mover and shaker of this will be the camel, called the ship of the desert. Donkeys, horses simply couldn't do it, but camels can. Camel is actually, in the camel saddle, are technological innovations, how to carry heavy loads across this burning desert. They will connect the Middle East and East Africa with the big West African empires, Ghana, Mali, and Songhai. So, gold is going to be washed. It'll be packed in feathers, where it will then be stamped and made to colorful, beautiful coins just like this. worth its weight in gold is salt. These are giant blocks of salt being dug out of a mine in North Africa. If you ever hear the term salary, it comes from salt. People's wages, their salary, used to be paid in salt. In the hot era, you needed to prevent dehydration, like drinking a Gatorade or Powerade. It's also how you preserved your meat, your fish, your chicken in the ancient world where there was no refrigerator. Everybody got that? Gold and salt. And that's what your table salt looks like before it's prettied up. So it's a big giant block. All right. Ghana. Ghana is going to be the foundational empire in West Africa. Other foundations you could think of, it is like the Olmecs or the Mayas in Mexico. It's like Great Britain for the Industrial Revolution. It is the first big empire of its kind. And Ghana, over here in West Africa, is situated because it controls all of the trade routes in West Africa. Nothing comes in or out of that area without going through Ghana. The government in Ghana also had a large monopoly on virtually the main important items like gold and salt and copper, just like the Han Dynasty of China. To think of Ghana, all right, we're going to say really it doesn't become a big empire till around 700 to 1240. So you want to think of the heart of the Western European Dark Ages, like right before Charlemagne. It will last through the Crusades and end right before the Renaissance. For context, a great thing to talk about during the Empire of Ghana is the growth and the spread of Islam, right? 700s, when Islam is really just rocking and rolling and spreading across the area. That is, or like Charlemagne and the Crusades. In the Americas at this time, it's the heyday of the Mayan Empire. The end of Ghana is right around the time the Aztecs and Incas became big time. Are we good there? All right, we're Kublai Khan over in Asia. So they run along the Niger River. And gold and salt are their big commodities. Islam is going to be a big influence. It will come across on the trade routes. And Muslim merchants are going to hang out. And they're going to show the West African kings, most of which do not convert at this time. But because the Muslims are literate, they will be counselors or advisors to the emperor or the king. And the king will slowly make elaborate concessions, very elaborate concessions to accommodate Islamic merchants. So Ghana is going to be wealthy. They're going to have a monopoly on gold and salt and all trade items. Their king will have great access to his own people, and they're going to control this area and be the first to welcome Islam. They will encounter a group of nomadic Muslims from North Africa, and they will see their empire, unfortunately, collapse. Is everybody good? Picking right up on the ashes of Mali, or of Ghana, is going to be Mali. And Mali is going to be a little different. Mali is going to be a collection of city-states very similar to the ancient Greek city-states, and they will control West Africa from, let's say, 12 to 1500. From the European Renaissance through the age of exploration. And Mali is going to be like the different Chinese dynasties. They're going to say, okay, what did Ghana do that was so great? Why don't we just copy it? Why don't we just do the same thing? What are we gonna do? Okay, that was a softball lob. Hoping someone would pick up on that one. Thank you, Anna. All right. So, Mali has several important kings, but the big thing that they create is the city of Timbuktu. And this Timbuktu is not only going to become a capital, but it is going to become a mecca. It is a cosmopolitan magnet for scholars, for researchers, for religious people. Anybody who's anybody wants to come to Timbuktu. It was the Athens or the Rome or the Constantinople of its day. If you were a scholar of any type, you showed up in Timbuktu. And Mali is ruled by kings named Mansas or Mansas. It means supreme sacred ruler. You are the supreme sacred ruler. The most famous is Mansa Musa. Mansa Musa will expand the borders of Mali, and Mali become the first to capture their neighbors and use them as like plantation slave labor on sugarcane plantations down along the Niger River. And Mansa Musa is most famous for going on that Hajj, where he travels from Timbuktu over to Mecca. And while he goes, he tries to really live up to the tenets of Islam in the 5 pillars. Anyone who met, he handed out money. He builds schools. He builds madrasas. He builds mosques from Timbuktu in West Africa over to Mecca. And as you all know, he handed out so much gold in Cairo that he caused massive inflation for over a decade. That is how crazy rich Mansa Musa was. He will bring back a lot of Islamic scholars. They want him to make, he wants them to help him make a perfect Islamic state in West Africa. It's simply what he is known for. So, I don't know if this is a real word or not, but it is Mansa Musa who helped Islamize West Africa to its greatest extent. Unfortunately, stories of him having so much gold make it up to Europe in the Renaissance, and the Europeans hear that some guy down there has got so much gold, he's just giving it away. Let's go down there and take a look. So the Mali kingdom will go from, let's say, 1200 to like 1650. That is the age of exploration. It is the age of conquest in the Americas. It is the Columbian Exchange, the transatlantic trade. It is the formation of the gunpowder empires over in Asia. The Ottomans, the Safavids, and the Mughals. So, anyway. By the late 1400s, Mali is going to undergo several civil wars, and the kingdom will break into various parts. The one mighty kingdom will just shatter. Couple of big guys we want to know is King Sundiata. And Sundiata will reign in the 1200s, and he will make several improvements in technology and agriculture that lead to a massive population boom. Whatever. He will enlarge the city of Timbuktu and will begin working with the Europeans in what will become known as the Great European Slave Trade. Okay, while I see pencils moving, I will take a break. These will be Portuguese slave forts, some of which are still there, diabolical things, because shortly, building on the ashes of Mali, will be the last great West African kingdom known as Songhai. And their king, Sunni or Soni Ali, becomes a full-blown imperialist, like an Aztec, like ancient Rome, like different Chinese dynasties. We are going to go out and we are going to conquer you. He builds a naval flotilla, like barges, and he has a horse-mounted cavalry. So, soldiers mounted. I'm in my field with my shovel or my garden hoe, and here comes a dude flying out of the river on a horse with a sword. I'm like, man, I'm good. So he conquers a lot of territory. He will die in 1492, right as Columbus gets lost and discovers the New World. One of the great kings of the Songhai Empire dies. He will be followed by Askia Muhammad al-Tari. And Askia was a passionate, zealous Muslim. He increases West African trade with Muslims, but, on the negative side, he is such a zealous Muslim that he encourages so many to move, he displaces his own people. In order to bring in more Muslims to his empire, he forces farmers out of their farmland. The city gets bigger, and the people have a difficult time feeding themselves. Songhai will be the West African empire that really is in first contact with the slave traders, the Portuguese and the Spanish. It is during their time that all the Native Americans are killed off by overwork and mercury poisoning. And so the Spanish need a new labor force, so where do they go? To Songhai and to even Mali. Hey, can we get some of those guys down there on the sugarcane plantations? We're going to plant those in the Caribbean islands, and off we go. And they will hit what I call the big shoulder in Senegambia during the Senegal and the Gambia rivers. Portugal is just right up here, so they sail down the coast and up these big rivers. So this is the first area that is impacted, by Islam or by the slave trade. After a while, this area will just simply run out of people, and this will cause Africans to go into the interior, capture other tribes, and bring them to the coastline to sell to the Europeans. Number one, they get trade items, copper, salt, alcohol. Number two, it keeps them safe. They are a business partner. They are a middleman with the Europeans. After a while, the population decreases, so the Portuguese will move farther down the coast, and they will get to the kingdom of the Congo. And the Congo is where one of the large, big African rivers are. The Congo River cuts deep into the heartland of the continent and has hundreds, if not thousands, of tributaries. And the Portuguese go down there looking for gold. They don't find a lot, but that doesn't matter because the new big industry will be the slave trade. And so the Kingdom of the Congo and slave trade is the heart of the Columbian Exchange transatlantic slave trade. And now we have the Americas that will be linked with Africa and Europe, connecting the Indian Ocean and the Silk Road to the Americas. We really now have an entire global economy. The Europeans will bring tobacco and alcohol to consumables that the people will use. They will want more of it, and they will say, well, we'll give you more, but we're going to need some more slaves. It's very similar to the precursor of the British in China. Oh, you want opium? Well, we'll give you more, but we need all of your silver. Oh, you're out of silver? Well, now we need your tea. We're going to give you something you're going to consume, you're going to want more, and we are going to ramp up our price. So this young man, King Afonso, was a Portuguese educated king. He was a Christian king, and he writes to the king of Portugal, hey, Christian king to Christian king, can you stop stealing my people? And the Portuguese king said, no, for two reasons. Why not? Number one, I'm making money, and two, I can't see it. So I really don't care. I can't see it from my house. Eventually, King Afonso is able to shove the Portuguese to Pont Noir, Blackport, to halt the slave trade there. The Portuguese try to assassinate him, and it backfires on them, and the people get so angry they call for a boycott of all Portuguese goods. Here is like an old like slave trading fort like the one I showed you. This is all that's left of it in the Congo now. Most of them were destroyed because people said, well, gosh, we don't want to remember all that bad stuff. So if we blow it up, then no one will know that it was there. So here we go to East Africa. Prince Henry up here in Portugal is going to open him a school of what? Navigation. And his sailors are going to go a little farther and a little farther and a little farther each time. They would take 60 days worth of food and water. When they got to day 30, they would turn around and come home. The next guy would take 90 and then 120. And little by little, they're able to get down here to the bottom of Africa, to the Horn of Africa, or the Cape of Good Hope. Call it the Cape of Good Hope for two reasons. Number one, because of the intense South Atlantic and Indian Ocean current, it's very, very, very nasty, and you hope you made it over to India so you could get rich. Portuguese got around here, and they were hoping that India was like Madagascar. But then they're like, oh man, we got this big frickin' ocean. Man, this sucks. But they finally make it around. Now, the Indian Ocean trade, India and East Africa, the Islamic trade has been around since like the 600s. It reached its heyday, Indian Ocean trade, right around 1200. All right, with like Mali and Timbuktu being built. Think of right before the Renaissance, the heyday of the Aztec and Incan empires. Well, there's trade on the Indian Ocean going on in East Africa already. Way back into the 800s, we have the Islamic slave trade going on in Africa well before the West African one. Well, the Portuguese get around there and they want to control it. They want to get in on it. But the Muslims won't trade with them. Neither will the people of East Africa. So the Portuguese says, well, if we can't have it, well, we'll simply just destroy it. So they cause widespread destruction in East Africa, destroying Indian Ocean trade and blowing up all the port facilities. They kind of condemn East Africa to economic desolation. The people who were fleeing the Portuguese went to the interior and ran into a group of Africans from the interior suffering from famine. So thousands upon thousands died. Which brings us, we're going to wind up down here to the kingdom of the Great Zimbabwe. And the Great Zimbabwe will be a southern regional empire from, say, 1220 up to about 1500. They were just far enough inland that nobody really bothered them. Am I going too fast? You guys okay?
What was the date, please?
1220 to about 1500. Good. All right. People of Southern Africa and Zimbabwe are very interesting. They live right along the Limpopo and the Zambezi rivers, and they were gold traders. They have a lot of alluvial gold, and this is one of those things that we really cannot explain. We have found objects from China and from Persia, from Iran in Zimbabwe. We've also found objects from Zimbabwe and Iran and China, but we don't know how they got there. Either they had direct trade or there was a middleman. They're nowhere else but in those two specific areas. And as you can see, they lived in a mirror image of Greek-like city-states, the biggest of which is known as the Great Zimbabwe. But they had several of these. The biggest one is about a 60-acre acropolis, just like Athens, where the wealthy aristocrats and the nobles live inside the city, and the peasant farmers lived outside. A lot of them were farmers. They raised cattle. They did a lot of gold and stonework, and they just kind of hung out. They were never really bothered by the Portuguese. There is a sizable native population that lives there to this very day, of people who keep the old ancient ways going. South Africa. South Africa is very interesting. If we get done here, we can go do a little bit of like modern Africa. On the southern tip, we have a colony that the Dutch will settle, called Cape Town. And the Dutch settled there to refill their water, to restock up with like fruits, and get ready to run for India. And it was nice. The native people there were known as Khoikhoi. And the group paying for this is the very powerful Dutch East India Trading Company, the ancestor of the British East India Company. And people there invested expecting to get rich. I'm going to put in money guaranteeing myself a lot of money. So no matter what, we've got to come back with something. Problem is, sailors have been on board for 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, and they get off in Africa and they're like, wow, the sun is out, the sky is blue, come on guys, time to get back on the ship. And guys said, well, actually, I think I'll stay right here. But you have to get back on. You're a sailor. Well, I'm not going to do it. And slowly, they begin to build a large settlement. They become known as Afrikaners and have their own dialect, Yamibru. And they slowly begin to dominate the once peaceful Khoikhoi. The Khoikhoi will wind up being traders and cattle farmers are going to be displaced off their grazing lands as the Dutch will set up big giant farms in plantation. Eventually, the Khoikhoi are going to rebel, but they're a peaceful, non-warlike people So they are quickly defeated by the Dutch industrialists. Afrikaners are going to stay for a couple hundred years before they are dominated by the British. The British will take over and they will lay down the governmental policy known as apartheid, where a small white minority will govern the large, vast black majority for years, hundreds of years. South Africa, great in gold work, wooden carvings. The other thing we get, probably because of the Bantu migrations, is from Central all the way to Southern Africa. We have a lot of parables or folk tales, kind of like Aesop's fables, something that is a story that is to teach you a lesson. That is a quick trip around Africa. You guys got any gas in the tank to talk about like imperialism and decolonization real fast? All right, we just did imperialization, so it shouldn't be too. Let me go back to this slide. This one. All right. The one with words. So you do more than just pictures, Ethan? That's awesome. All right. My books have like pictures in them. Theo.
When did the British displace the Afrikaners?
The British will displace the Afrikaners late 1700s, early 1800s. They'll fight a series of wars in which to do it. All right. What do you guys think is more important, imperialization, or imperialism, or decolonization? We just did imperialism?
Yeah.
All right. All right. Now I gotta see if I can find that PowerPoint. Oh, no. All right, so you were that. Decolonization, we're going to flip down, we're going to go through, we'll do this one on decolonization is nasty. All right. Please tell me I have it. This is going to look terrible on the YouTubes. All right. I don't have decolonization in Africa. Crap. All right. You guys want to do a little 20th century history? All right, great, because that way we can possibly get to it. So, anyway. Do you guys want to do like Cold War? Do you want to do decolonization in Latin America, which is, let me double check here real fast. I hate doing this on the YouTubes and looking stupid, but that's okay. What's going on? Cold War? You're saying Cold War. Legit, seriously. All right. I know I've got decolonization in Africa somewhere. I just can't find it right now. Cold War. Very, 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 very simple. All right. We are going to fight a massive war with the Soviet Union. But it's not going to be a direct conflict. We are an ally in World War II. And as World War II ends, there is a differing ideological battle between Western European capitalism and Eastern European communism. Stalin believes that we are going to invade and change his way of life. Joseph Stalin is the leader of the Soviet Union. We are also afraid of the idea of communism taking over. The problem is the Soviet Union is going to be dominant for about a 50-year period of time. from the, well, a little bit stronger than that. We'll say from like the 1920s up to